So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Vicky Antonio. I'm a consultant working with the Urban Climate Change Resilience Trust Fund. So this is the first of 6 workshops that will be held as part of this year's ADB Online Sanitation Dialogue, which is running from today until the 22nd of April. So for further information, please check the website online ADB Sanitation Dialogue 2021. So this afternoon's workshop is organized by UCCRTF. Just briefly, UCCRTF is a multi-donor trust fund under the Urban Financing Partnership Facility that is managed by the Urban Sector Group in SDCC. The trust fund aims to build the resilience of poor and vulnerable residents in at least 25 cities to the adverse impacts of climate change. We are working through ADB projects in 8 priority countries, namely Bangladesh, India, Indonesia, Myanmar, Nepal, Pakistan, Philippines, and Vietnam. So today's workshop will focus on ways to unpack resilience and incorporate its key elements in planning decentralized sanitation in urban areas. The framework is structured along the ADB project cycle, highlighting the factors that should be considered in the various stages. So the workshop will focus on 2 levels of planning: at the national level through state level and sector development plans, and then at the project level covering citywide planning and community involvement. So we will start this session with a scene setting presentation to level off on how we define climate change and resilience. And then this will be followed by 3 presentations on the application of various tools for integrating resilience into sanitation projects supported by ADB. And afterwards, we will have a short moderated discussion focusing on sanitation solutions at the community level implemented by our partners from Oxfam in different settings. We will then open up the floor for questions and then a wrap up of the day's key takeaways. So just a reminder to our speakers to keep within your time allocation. I will give you a reminder when you have 2 minutes left so you can wrap up. Okay, so moving on. So to start off today's workshop, we would like to find out how different people understand resilience. So we have put up some poll questions on Mentimeter. May I ask Ramon to please share his screen? Please go to menti.com. The code is 1908-4237. Or you can also use the QR code. Okay, so can we go to the question, Ramon? So the first question is, what are the main climate change issues affecting your country? So you have 30 seconds. Please put in your, plug in your responses in Mentimeter. I'm sure we have more than one person. Flooding. Okay. Okay, so I think what are the main responses that we're getting? Drought, flooding. I think flooding is the main thing that everyone is experiencing. Sea level rise, droughts, severe weather conditions, lack of water, increased typhoons. Okay, thank you very much for that. And now let's move on to the second question. So after understanding what is climate change, please indicate how do you define climate change resilience? Ability to withstand shocks and stresses, capacity to cope, adapt, recover, adaptability, ability to adapt to changing climate stresses. So a lot of it has to do with adaptability, withstanding adverse effects, preparedness to sustain, being able to recover quickly after disasters, ability to cope with impacts of climate change. Okay, great. So Okay, I think now we can close the voting. So just to sum up the inputs from our participants. So the main effects of climate change being experienced relate to flooding, too much water, lack of water, droughts, extreme weather events, and resilience. Climate change resilience basically refers to adaptability, being able to recover quickly from shocks and stresses brought on by climate change. So thank you very much for participating in our small poll. So now I would like to start this workshop. So first, I would like to introduce our speaker, Ramon Abracosa. He's an educator and an independent consultant. His technical background is on natural resources management, environment, and civil engineering. He received his master's and PhD from Stanford University. Over 3 decades of international consulting practice, he has worked with various government and non-government organizations, international financing institutions, bilateral aid agencies, and the UN. As an educator, he has held teaching positions at the University of California, Berkeley, the University of the Philippines, and is currently an adjunct professor at the Asian Institute of Management. So Ramon, turning it over to you to give us to help us unpack resilience. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you all, and greetings everyone. Before we call on our main speakers, allow me to just share a few slides to set the stage, so to speak, provide a frame of reference for our discussion, which is themed around climate strategies for sanitation. We have a subheading of unpacking the meaning of resilience. So we envision sanitation for all, with human waste safely managed across the whole sanitation service chain that is shown in the sequence that you are familiar with. And some of you might think that it should have, in fact, an earlier beginning, which says creating a demand for this kind of infrastructure and service. So why is resilience important to add to inclusivity and sustainability? Well, because the people who need most to be provided with safe sanitation are the ones also the most susceptible to the impacts of climate change. So I also take this opportunity to use a framework that the Urban Climate Change Resilience Trust Fund that Vicky introduced to you is adopting to be able to assess and plan for resilient infrastructure in general along different levels from country to city to even community. And that speaks to a system-based approach. Sorry, Vicky, since my...
do you want me to share my screen?
No, hold on. I will remove the laser point and see what happens. Yeah, okay. So we define resilience as mainly the ability to not lose functionality in the face of stress. And resilience is used in many disciplines, including engineering, ecology, economics, even psychology. But we use IPCC's definition, which speaks to capacity, capacity to be able to handle stress within a system's perspective, looking at both hazardous events, meaning events that happen in an acute way and suddenly, as well as those that happen over a more gradual trend that needs to be addressed through sanitation. So resilience from this definition is a combination of looking into the hazard, the source of the hazard, the relevant hazard, the exposure, principally the location, and the vulnerability, very important, the capability of the system to handle the exposure to the hazard. Anyway, we'll use the term resilience as a short name for adaptation resilience, which is more common in the literature. And we do not include in this definition, by the way, mitigation for now. So resilience to what? And the system is comprised of the physical assets, and the physical assets are some of the things that you see in this diagram. We had the traditional centralized sewered system, which is really a small proportion of sanitation that we see in Asian cities, maybe in the order of only up to 20%. But the bulk is non-sewered, and this is something that ADB, as you heard in the earlier webinar, is looking to very strongly in the coming years. And also, we should not forget that there are other ways of looking at non-sewered sanitation in an on-site sense. And this is an example of a cluster on-site sanitation that one of our speakers, Carrie, will explain to us some more. So physical assets are a combination of these three different approaches. And the second one is the setting. And when we say environment, we not only refer to the ecological environment, the setting, the areas that are near the sanitation points that need to be looked into, but also the built environment. In other words, the link between the sanitation infrastructure and drainage, solid waste management, transport routes, settlements, and the way they are congested. So that is the second component of what is being protected by resilience. And the third is very important, people and institutions, because after all, resilience is by people, and it's institutions that really make sanitation work, as we heard in the earlier webinar. So system capacity to be resilient is to adapt to change, climate change, gradual, as well as rebound from shocks in terms of disaster management. And resilience to what? Well, resilience to more intense, prolonged rainfall and its effect on flooding, which from our word cloud was the #1 concern. The variability, longer dry spells in between very intense rainfall, of course, sea level rise affecting coastal areas, now prone to more frequent tidal flooding almost every day, increasing temperatures, and more frequent storms. But the challenges for planners and decision makers are a combination of the way the science is presented, because there is unavoidable uncertainty. There is not one projection of what the future will be like, how severe, when will it happen. So this needs to be looked at in a risk framework. And we know that we cannot just rely on the old climate and make a projection out of that, because of what in climate science is referred to as nonlinear effects, tipping points. In other words, the past trend is not an indication of what the future will look like. So we have to depend on scientific models to be able to assess this. And as we know, climate is a problem amplifier, a multiplier. So we need to look at it in a systemic risk sense, the way it combines with other risks to make things worse. And vulnerability is highly local. Mitigation is global, but vulnerability is very local and with disproportionate impacts on the poor. All of this need to be communicated well with stakeholders and decision makers, and that is the challenge that remains even in the area of sanitation. I have a word cloud in the middle that, in my opinion, exemplifies the importance of these three aspects: institutions, resources, and technical in a relative sense. The core dimension, if you like, is institutions, and that is where most of the strategizing it really needs to be built around, because sanitation is a government responsibility, and that has so many implications in terms of driving the government to act on that responsibility, and that requires a policy framework, mandates and accountability, then coordination, and of course financial capacity. And the last bullet, not the least, community involvement is very important as we move to the FSM modality. Even the bank's recent evaluation of the sector looks to institutions as a linchpin of building resilience for sustainability as well as effectiveness. Overall, in Asia Pacific, only about half, about 60%, of urban dwellers have access to the complete sanitation chain, and that is exemplified in Metro Manila, for example. 44% of sewage is safely managed, and the balance of that is not. Rural areas present an even more daunting challenge because of the varied context. We said vulnerability is very local, and in rural areas, so we see that locality very much in evidence. There is no one size fits all solution, and this is really where we need to engage with communities to find the best solution. The other challenge is making a business case for sanitation. I don't mean business cases in making a profit sense, making an investment case. So why should the government invest in this? Sanitation is seen as a government responsibility, but mostly from expense point of view, using mainly the cheapest solutions available, basic level of service, no appreciation of the co-benefits that are important to make the argument. Because without the co-benefits, the resilience measures will only be seen to add more to the cost and make the investments even less attractive. Resilience costs will cover preventive measures, mitigation measures, and contingency. But benefits, in the seminar today, there was talk on the avoided future damage, as well as the opportunity cost lost from not being safe with sanitation. But the co-benefits are many: economic productivity, avoided diseases, and the like. So we unpack resilience along these logical steps, and of course the sanitation chain. Look at the risks that can be mitigated, first avoided, then absorbed, and then prepare for contingencies. So that is the coverage of what resilience planning needs to be in a total sense. Finally, on the aspects of resilience, we use a scaffolding, this framework that looks at 4 dimensions of climate resilience. Structured along physical resilience of the structures and the infrastructure systems, the ecological resilience of the natural setting, as well as its built urban setting, and especially the social and institutional resilience, managing the vulnerability, especially of the poor, and enhancing the capacity of the institutions, including the private sector, to contribute to the solution, as well as financial resilience to provide risk cover and to fund timely relief, recovery, and rebuilding when needed. The tools are available. ADB has a variety of these tools added to the ones that we find online, the FSM toolbox, for example, but these are all available, beginning with the planning for infrastructure in a climate proofing sense, or in a way that is more strategic, looking into nature as part of the solution, and especially in social and institutional poverty and social impact assessment, social safeguards, gender mainstreaming, disaster risk management, and finally, economic and financial safety nets. The ADB has a good comparative advantage, but needing to be more expansive in its approach to balancing costs and benefits. So with that, I end my presentation and come back to you, Vicky. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ramon. Appreciate your setting your own timer so that to keep within the time. Thank you very much. Okay, so just to sum up, so just to underline the key messages from Ramon's presentation, resilience encompasses components beyond climate change. It necessitates an integrated approach to ensure that all moving parts, so to speak, are well-oiled. While we focus this week on sanitation, you cannot approach it separately from solid waste or drainage, for example, because if waste is not properly managed, then it can clog up your drains and affect other infrastructure. Okay, so now moving on to our next presentation now. So we will have a set of 3 project-specific presentations. So I would like to introduce our next speaker, Lakshmi Sharma. So Lakshmi is currently with the South Asia Urban Development and Water Division at ADB, an engineer with over 20 years of experience on integrated urban planning and development, water and sanitation, solid waste management, urban transport, and infrastructure and service financing models. A strong advocate of multi-stakeholder driven development, she tries to incorporate this into all aspects of project design, processing, and management, including the application of technologies. She holds a Master of Engineering degree from AIT in Bangkok and has worked in countries such as Georgia, India, the Kyrgyz Republic, Maldives, Bangladesh, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Tajikistan, and Thailand. Calling on Lakshmi on her presentation, Madhya Pradesh Urban Services Improvement Project towards CWIS mainstreaming. So I will present her slides.
Thank you, Vicky, for your introductions and the welcome to all. I will be sharing our experience in Madhya Pradesh, particularly on moving towards mainstreaming citywide inclusive sanitation. Vicky?
Yes,
can you
bring it up. Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. So as I mentioned, and the Vicky, I will be sharing this our experience, learning, and the process together with the BMGF and the government of Madhya Pradesh in mainstreaming citywide inclusive sanitation. Next slides, please. Madhya Pradesh is a landlocked state of India and one of the low-income states of India also. So this is a project, second phase of the Madhya Pradesh Urban Services Improvement Project. The ADB has supported through its additional financing. The project was approved recently in September 2020, and it is for 7 years. ADB financing at 270 million out of 386 million. And government is putting like 115 million, what is quite a sizable amount of resources. So the project has two outputs, particularly infrastructure club with the institutions and also the capacity development. This is to ensuring for the sustainability and to the services to all. The project will benefit 1.6 million people. Next slides, please. Before I talk the topics of the events, the sanitation, the most important part is the water supply, also being supported under the project. It supports from source to the point of use. It covers the wide range of the technology also, but particularly the universal coverage, I would like to mention on that, and the 100% metering. And the most important part is the e-governance and the customer service. And it's improved the whole sanitary urban water service chain itself. Next slides, please. So this is the one about the sanitations. The project is piloting in the 6 urban local bodies. You can see in this slide the existing situation of the Madhya Pradesh on the sanitations. The whole range of the mix of the activities or the outputs are being supported to mainstreaming the CWIS in the project. Just before going to the next slides, I would like to remember the processes that we have followed while processing the project itself. Government of Madhya Pradesh has shared with the 6 DPRs while reviewing these detailed project reports. What we came to know is basically it was focusing on the constructing of the infrastructure, sewer network, together with the treatment plan. Definitely there was a customer service was mentioned and e-governance. However, more on the infrastructure oriented. Service is partly being mentioned, but not really on a holistic way. And the coverage was not the universal coverage, or services are not for all, and the partial coverage are there. So on that note, we approached the BMGF, how we can address and make it as inclusive. In that context, next slide, please. We come up with a framework, collaboration together with the government of Madhya Pradesh, ADB and the BMGF, where the impact, where the impact is the economic growth, urban mobility improved, and infant mortality reduced in Madhya Pradesh is the vision of the government of Madhya Pradesh, which is being supported by the outcome statement everyone in the city has access to benefits from sustainable sanitation services and a special focus on vulnerable and women and children. To achieve with that, we also mapped out, based on the CWIS framework, elements of a checklist, particularly focusing on the safe, equitable, and the sustainable outcomes. And the areas and the how part was the how we could achieve or contribute to achieve the impact of outcome statement of the government of Madhya Pradesh. The 4 areas has been planned, or 4 areas has been agreed. The first one is the citywide inclusive planning tools, which is basically the evidence base. The second one is the integrated urban planning, where the coordinated approach is required. As we have seen in the earlier slides, there's a urban ecosystem is very much complex. It has a multiple subsectors, water to the transport, and the multiple stakeholders are also be there. There are the climate change challenges are also be there. There's a municipal governance is also there. So we thought about to have a piloting in 2 towns about this, how we can really mainstream the integrated approach, CWIS, through the integrated approach itself. The third area is the based on the detailed project report, what I have mentioned earlier, which is the taking into the incremental step with a realistic, feasible steps, part of along strategy using adaptive planning. Fourth area is very much across the 3 areas that I have mentioned previous, which is the capacity building and the sanitation regulatory frameworks. These are the how part to achieve this impact as well as the outcome. And the information technology is across the to address the all the areas, and this is the foundation to be moving forward onto mainstreaming citywide inclusive sanitation. Next slide, please. So what we have really steps that we have followed in this process is the starting from the DPRs, the developing the town-wise urban Watson profile, and special mapping through the GIS, and also stakeholder engagement, and also the technology through the technology. We have identified the demarcation of uncovered areas and develop the typology metrics for the assessment and solutions, and align with the CWIS principles. These are the steps that we have followed throughout the process as of now. Next slide, please. While process are being followed, we are also come up with the planning tools as well as the sensitizing the government and taking them along the process itself, so that they are fully on board to create the ownerships itself. So first, the 3 important tools that are being is the decision-making matrix. Here you can see the multiple criteria and sub-criteria which can demonstrate the complexities, and the GIS-based NSS suitability analysis was done. I will come back to that, how we have done it and what are the areas that has been focused. And finally, that is overlay with the CWIS compliance framework to ensure the equity, safety, and sustainable outcomes, and as well as to create the functions, responsibility, accountability, and the resource planning. There are the 3 challenges mainly, as we all know, is some pandemic, data, and the multiplicity of the sector, multiplicity of the stakeholder, multiplicity of the challenges. Next slide, please. So how we overcome those challenges is the one of these data-driven integrated meaningful information systems, where the sanitation is a one part. It has to be integrated across the governance or the municipal systems, which is only able to done with the IMS itself. So it is the catalyzing the sustainability of the CWIS outcomes. Where is the, just like to highlight is that the particularly on the property tax collections through to go to the SWM information support systems, as well as to the fiscal loss management. So here are the landscape that has been already mentioned, which is basically on the GIS-based database, and the CWIS baseline of the town has to be integrated with all the set. to drive efficiency, responsiveness, accountability, and of the municipalities. Next slide, please. So what IMS has facilitates? It facilitates planning, management, and the evaluation. So we are not talking only the infrastructure or the sanitation system itself. We are talking about or the focusing on the service delivery. That is the outcome oriented. So you can see in this slides itself is the wide range of the attributes which can be on the planning side to take forward, in the management and the evaluation and the monitoring itself is a very complicated. The information technology can helps to integrate, helps to overlay these all the attributes in a one platform, which can contribute to the evidence-based planning. Next slide, please. Management and evaluations. So I just want to show this chart where are the data has been gathered with a short period of time. Thank you to the team who has been come up with all this mapping out for the all 6 towns, sanitations related data, revenues from the governance perspective from the municipality, which is very important. This was actually discussed in the first sessions about the taxation system and the business operations data also being, it's a management aspects. You can see here are the how complicated the situations itself, but if we start follow the process, think through the system perspective, it will not be so complicated. Next slide, please. So the next example, this is the one of the thing I have mentioned, using the IMIs for the evidence-based planning. This is for the one of the town, which is the Nagda city of the Madhya Pradesh also. So the development of NSS suitability analysis was done through the primary analysis with the demarcated areas suitable for NSS and the based on population density and built up area maps were prepared. Next slides, please. And the secondary analysis was done, overlaying the DPR's network map with the primary analysis map and identify the conflict areas. What does the conflict areas means is that the DPR has a provision for example, the NS. Then if the analysis come up with the NSS, that we are terming as the conflict areas. I will come back to you on that part later. Next slide, please. So the secondary trials, here is we are showing that the conflict area, the light yellow part is the network area, which has been proposed by the DPRs. And the darker part is now the more suitable for the intervention suitability for the NSS part. So how this will be platform for the stakeholder to dialogue and stakeholder to exchange the informations and data to discuss whether which one is suitable for the NSS based on the decision matrix, based on the all the layers that has been mapped out. The next slide, please. So on the treasury part, we have actually laid with the climate and topography to develop the vulnerability map in order to demonstrate the decision maker, which area could be feasible for to which systems, so that it's the sensitizing about this decision maker and the stakeholders, and to strengthen the rationale for the NSS and the SSS system for to provide the holistic and the service for all. Next slide, please. Next slide. Next slide. You can just go. This is to show that what are the data set that we have being laid over to come up with the NSS and the SSS solutions, just like the low income settlements, land use plan, infrastructures. And these are the information was gathered together with the local bodies, together with the MPUDCs and the expert team from the BMGF and the ADB. Next slides, please. So tertiary analysis come up with provides the detailed strategy to integrate NSS component into the sanitation planning to ensure inclusive and resilient sanitation coverage. Next slides. So second part of the integrated management information system is to convergence of the information technology with the mobile technology and the municipal business processes. Here is the two apps, basically web-based app and the mobile apps for the field assessment. It across the application for services, containment assessment throughout to the service provision. It can be operated by the customers. It can be managed by the municipality itself. Next slide, please. So this is the monitoring evaluations using a powerful dashboard for a real-time status of a services. So the ULBs decision makers can understand what is the current status, what intervention has to be taken. Not only that, this is the open to the citizens also. They can access the information of the of their municipalities about the services that being provided by the municipalities. So that creates the accountability part of the CWIS. So with that, next slides, please. I think. So with that, I would like to conclude and I like to thank you all for listening this presentation and welcome. And we are learning, and this is just a starting, and then we will implement and we will also going to share later. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lakshmi. That was a very interesting presentation. I know a lot of you have questions, but please put them in the chat box, and then later on we will have an opportunity to ask them to our speakers. Okay, so thank you very much for that. So now I'd like to introduce our next speaker. So our next speaker is another colleague from UCCRTF. Bon is administrator of the Spatial Data Analysis Explorer, or SPADE, a web-based GIS portal for ADB. Bon is a licensed geodetic engineer with a technical background in surveying, remote sensing, photogrammetry, GIS analysis, and data analytics. To name a few, his experience in geodetic surveying include the Subic-Clark-Tarlac Expressway in the Philippines, as well as the upgrading of the Batangas port. He also has experience in hydrographic surveying, being involved in some projects in Thailand and Vietnam. And also in terms of tax mapping, he organized training for local government units nationwide in the Philippines, and has also been engaged in projects financed by the World Bank, USAID, and the Australian government. So now I'd like to turn it over to Bon to talk about using GIS tools for CWIS planning. Please go ahead, Bon.
All right, thank you, Vicky, for the introduction. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. Hope everybody is safe despite of the situation that we are in right now. So what I'll be discussing is, as you can see, I'll share my screen right now. It's addressing physical asset resilience. So in the context of sanitation, how could we use this spatial data analysis for a citywide inclusive sanitation project design? So taking off from the discussion from Mon and Lakshmi, this is more of a granular approach wherein we have this sanitation infrastructure, and what I would do in the next couple of slides is, okay, if this is my infrastructure, how would it be affected by flooding, by sea level rise, by subsidence and all. And while I'm doing the discussion on the analysis, I'll also be introducing the tools and the data sets that were used for this analysis. Like in terms of tools, we were utilizing open source tools, and one of them is a SPADE, as we have here in the Asian Development Bank. And in terms of data sets, also open source, like the satellite images, drone images, SAR images, which I would discuss as well later on. So for this presentation, I'll be focusing in two project examples, so we could have that that details that we wanted to see for this in terms of planning. So moving on, I'll just have a brush through on the data sources used for for this analysis. I think the PowerPoint would be shared to you guys. But basically, all of the data sets that you could see in your screen right now are all open source. So what I'm saying here is one of the basic principles that we are applying in SPADE is before you jump into this very high resolution data or buying things that you think could be utilized in doing the analysis for your project, might as well perhaps consider the open source data that is available, because well, the advent of technology right now, you would see satellite images with resolutions of 10 meters, which could also be used for planning purposes. So as you can see in the data sources, we also have KNMI Explorer and Climate Central. These are for the climate projections, which I will show in the coming slides. So moving on, so I'll start with the first project example. So this is in Indonesia, the Semarang Citywide Inclusive Sanitation Project. You can see a map on the right side of your screen. That's basically the infrastructure, the proposed infrastructure that would be laid out for Semarang. And as you can see on the text, although nearly all households have septic tanks, these are often unlined, not regularly dislodged, and leaking, and thus posing a serious health risk to the communities. So the reliance on groundwater for water supply for most of the urban population exacerbates also the situation. So please take note of the infrastructure shown on your screen. So that's the wastewater treatment plant. That's the red dot, as you can see, and then the main sewer network. That's the dark line, and then you could see the that's the main sewer, and then also the some of the lines that you could see that are going into the city. So moving on, next step is okay, we have this designs, this infrastructure designs, so might as well digitize it so we could reflect it on a map, as you can see in my screen right now. So infrastructures were digitized. You can see here the wastewater treatment plant represented by an orange. Is this an orange octagon? And then the sewer network by pink lines, and the main sewer trunk as represented by white lines. So what we will do here is, okay, we have the infrastructure. How will it? The basic questions are, how would this be affected by flooding? That's number one. The second one is subsidence, because subsidence is really an issue in Semarang. Well, not only in Semarang, but in most cities and at the Java province. I think Jakarta is also experiencing subsidence. And then the third one is sea level rise. So we'll incorporate this climate and hazard risks and see how it looks like when we overlay those analysis into this infrastructure. So moving on, and then aside from that infrastructure, we also digitize the building footprints just for the team to have to see the density of the building footprints. How, in terms of area, are they big or are they as small as 18 or 20 square meters? Because having this digitized building footprints would give us a sense of okay, this looks like the poor households within Semarang, and then you could also do some measurements in terms of the roads and the distances between the building footprints. I'll zoom out a bit. So what I'm saying here is there is also a potential challenge of providing sewerage sanitation in these dense areas, because I think you could see those messages or notes or signages when you see there's a construction on the road we're in. Okay, only one of the roads, there's only a partial of the road that could be utilized by cars and pedestrians. So if going back into this digitized building footprints, then you could see that there might be difficulty in installing the some sewer network within this within the within those alleys that you could see. And by the way, the spade team did not do this manually. We did the building footprints automatically by extracting this building footprints from OpenStreetMaps or those the satellite images that are available. So we used open source algorithms. So we're now in that technology. We're in you have that option where in 5 years, 10 years ago, you have to do this manually, going into each household footprints and then digitizing them manually. So right now, as you can see on your screen, there's around 57,000 building footprints that are digitized for this infrastructure. So moving on, so let's start with the flood risk. So as you can see in your screen right now, it's categorized as low, medium, high, and very high flood risk, and these are represented by different colors. So incorporating as well climate projections in terms of precipitation or rainfall. The maximum one-day rainfall that we've calculated is that there's a 10 to 20% increase for in terms of precipitation for 2040 to 2060 under RCP 4.5, and there's a 30% increase under RCP 8.5. If there are climate specialists within this webinar, there's a lot of climate modeling that is behind in these calculations. You have more than 24 climate models, but I just wanted to present this in a non-technical user perspective. So this is what. This is why just to capture those calculations in tabular format, what we're saying is if you're experiencing the amount of rainfall right now, it would probably increase 10 to 20% by between 2040 to 2060. So later on, using drones, I also have some shots for Semarang. If there is still some time, I'll show it within Spade. So moving on to the next hazard, we have now subsidence, which is really a concern in Semarang. So as you can see in your screen right now, it's the terrain motion between 2014 to 2017. So you could see in the map that in general, subsidence is really happening in Semarang, and it's happening at different levels. So you would see in some areas, subsidence is happening between 1 to 4 centimeters, but in some parts of the city, there's 10 to 12 centimeters of subsidence that is happening. So to cut the story short, in terms of subsidence, there's 4 centimeters per year in some areas of the planned network for the infrastructure, and up to 8 centimeters per year along the coast. So we are looking here at the top view because we're looking at an analysis for in terms of satellite images. But if you would look at for this sample on a cross-section format, I hope you can see the I'll do some drawings on my screen right now. So let's say that black line is the land in Semarang, looking at it on a cross-sectional perspective, the topography. So what we're saying here is that blue line, that is the subsidence that is happening in Semarang, an average of 4 to 8 centimeters per year. But what we're seeing in this analysis is that for the whole city, subsidence is happening at different rates. So you would see the red line that I draw. In some parts of the city, subsidence is happening at 3 centimeters. But if looking at some parts of the city, there is 10 to 12. So from an engineer's perspective, the designers that would do the main sewer network, I think they should consider the subsidence issue that is happening for the city in terms of their detailed engineering design. Because if not, you might experience that the sewer network might have some issues in 10 to or 20 years time. So that's it for subsidence. So moving on for on my presentation, let's overlay now the subsidence. So this is what I'm talking about a while ago. So if you overlay the infrastructure, you would see the effect of subsidence on parts of the main sewer network, and even on the wastewater treatment plant. So moving on, that's the subsidence. And then the third one is the sea level rise. So what you're looking at right now is the data came from Climate Central. We have some mapping for sea level rise for 2050. You're now seeing the extent of sea level rise for the city. So as you would notice, parts of the infrastructure, the main sewer line would be affected by sea level rise. And thanks to UCCRTF team, they raised this question to me last week. Wherein how if we incorporate moderate flooding into the sea level rise. So this is how it looks like right now. So this is what you're looking at is sea level rise with moderate flooding for year 2050. So as you can see, since Semarang is a coastal city, and you would notice most of the infrastructures would be affected by sea level rise. And I've seen a pop up in my screen right now. This is RCP 4.5. Yes. So
Bon, sorry, 2 minutes, please.
All right. So this is in RCP 4.5 thank you for that question. So since we only have 2 minutes, so let me go now to the end of the presentation. So let's there. So basically what we've tried to do is have these different risks and incorporate it in terms of infrastructure. But let's not forget that this analysis can also be done and combined with to identify sanitation gaps for the poor and the vulnerable. I forgot the vulnerable in the text. So it's not only for the infrastructure, but we could also analysis for the households. And in terms of slums, will they be affected, or would they be in terms of public service, would they be also incorporated in this infrastructure? And then the second closing remark for this is the different types of technology resources and that I utilized for this analysis. And before I forget, the institution. So moving forward, I'm having this discussion with the project officers, the design team that the project officer is working for this project, and we should also incorporate the institution because they might, because at the end of the day they are the recipient of this analysis and this the different data sets that we have right now. And just a quick discussion on SPADE. So all of the analysis that you have done, the algorithms the SPADE team could do, they are all incorporated into this Spatial Data Analysis Explorer, the SPADE. I hope everybody's familiar with it right now. And one of the good news is that this is now an interim tool within the bank. So thank you everyone. If you have questions, you could send an email to spadehelp@adb.org, and you could just also look me up on the ADB email and shoot us an email on the Spade team. So thank you everyone.
Thank you very much, Bon. That was very interesting. I know there are a lot of questions, so please plug them into the chat box. So just to add also, so Spade now currently holds data for more than 30 cities in 100 maps comprising of more than 1,000 layers of information. So for further information, please send us an email. So now our next speaker, allow me to introduce her, Ms. Carrie Birch. So she is a water-sensitive urban design practitioner and project manager for the co-design and build component of the RISE project in Indonesia, because it's also being implemented in Fiji. Her experience ranges from detailed design and nature-based solutions and green technologies and their integration with traditional green infrastructure and smart technologies through to policy and planning and the development of robust social safeguards to support the community development approach. Carrie is very passionate about the water-sensitive approach and its potential to change the way to plan on how we plan and build our cities and towns. So please turning it over to Carrie to talk about the project revitalization of informal settlements and their environments using a water-sensitive approach. Go ahead.
Thanks, Vicky. I'll just share my screen. Is that you're looking at the presentation?
All clear.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, so I mean, as Vicky mentioned, the context for the presentation today is the RISE program, and RISE stands for Revitalizing Informal Settlements and Their Environments. The RISE program is an action research program operating in Makassar in Indonesia and Suva in Fiji. RISE is undertaking a randomized control trial of 24 informal settlements. So there's 12 in each city, looking at the environmental and human health impacts and benefits as a result of informal settlement upgrading using a water sensitive approach, which includes nature-based solutions or green infrastructure. So the research component of RISE is aimed at gathering evidence of the changes in environmental health and the link to human health as a result of the upgrading approach. So I'm sure these stats are all familiar to most people who have joined us today. Needless to say, the scale of the challenge of delivering sanitation services to all is a huge one. There are many challenges in providing basic services to residents of urban informal settlements. Conventional approaches are not always fit for purpose in these situations. We need more tools in the toolbox, so to speak, or a mix of solutions if we're to achieve the target of leaving no one behind. RISE hopes to demonstrate an approach that's complementary to existing approaches to enhance the delivery of urban services in dense urban environments. So what nature-based solutions are included in the design of the project? Nature-based solutions are at the heart of the approach for RISE. The nature-based solutions considered as part of the RISE program include constructed wetlands for wastewater treatment, biofilters for grey water treatment, and biofilter drains for combined grey and stormwater treatment. I've just got a little video here. I hope that it works. For sanitation, where collection and transfer of a municipal scale wastewater treatment plants not feasible, a localized non-network treatment train approach is adopted. And you can see this in the video. It's using a combined treatment train of pressure sewer, septic tank, followed by constructed wetlands to treat the water before it's discharged into the drain. Well, so these wastewater treatment systems, the localised wastewater treatment systems, are part of an intervention that aims to address water management more broadly across each of the settlements. So that includes new toilets for households currently sharing toilets or who do not have access to a toilet, connection works for existing toilets, rainwater harvesting infrastructure, pipes and trenches for future connection to the municipal water supply system, local wastewater treatment systems, which we just saw, the pressure sewer with septic tanks, wetlands and biofilters, improved drainage and improved access for minor roads and pedestrian pathways. So what are some of the key design components for nature-based solutions at the project level? Nature-based solutions like constructed wetlands for wastewater treatment are fairly well understood. The science is fairly well understood, and there are many examples of this type of infrastructure across the globe. There are existing design standards and guidelines to assist the design of systems to achieve a specific treatment performance. But the contextualisation is important to ensure that the service delivery model and construction materials and methods are adapted for the given setting. And also that broader city planning is considered in the design. So for example, the way that a nature-based solution might be delivered on the ground might look quite different to in an informal settlement in Indonesia compared to, for example, a formal subdivision in Fiji. Our demonstration site shown here in Batua in Indonesia has been invaluable in terms of appropriately contextualising the infrastructure for the dense urban informal settlement environment in Makassar. And co-designing with communities has been key to that successful contextualisation. So I just talk a little bit more about the co-design process in RISE. Delivering integrated infrastructure at the community level, particularly in these retrofit scenarios, is really challenging. And it's not a challenge that's limited only to nature-based solutions. Even successful delivery of more traditional trunk infrastructure requires a sufficient level of community buy-in. So one way to overcome this challenge is to apply a community co-design approach where residents are partners in planning and decision-making. So in RISE, for example, the co-design process gives residents a voice and a chance to share their visions for the future. They hold discussions that are more than just about water management and green infrastructure. The co-design process in the RISE program empowers residents to make informed choices by building a shared understanding of what makes people sick and explaining how nature-based solutions work. And as a result, so far, we've experienced excellent community buy-in. Working together to locate infrastructure, not just for water and sanitation, but placemaking and design of future community spaces, has generated buy-in, genuine buy-in, and a shared sense of responsibility for success of the project. And we think this is really critical for long-term success of the infrastructure, and particularly in relation to operation and maintenance. So another important design feature is the combination of, sorry, I skipped a slide. Another important design feature is the principle of designing at nested scales and in response to community preferences. So in the settlements that RISE is working in Indonesia, there's been a clear community preference for cluster scale infrastructure. So a cluster is a group of households that form around a pressure pod and wetland treatment system. There was a clear community preference to not manage waste from neighbouring households unless those households were part of an existing social network, and that was typically an extended family. This design response is a direct result of working closely together with communities to find solutions for infrastructure locations in these really dense urban environments where space is so limited. Another important design feature is a combination of green infrastructure together with more traditional grey infrastructure and also smart technology. If we consider nature-based solutions as a standalone solution, there are many situations where the introduction of infrastructure just simply would not be feasible, particularly in the urban informal settlement context, where many settlements are located really low in the landscape and in areas that are difficult to service due to high population density and the low-lying topography. So while nature-based solutions such as the constructed wetlands and biofilters are at the heart of the solutions of these solutions for RISE. It's this combination of traditional grey infrastructure with the green and smart technology that provides opportunities to enhance service delivery for vulnerable communities. So in RISE, the design includes a simple but robust pump combined with smart controllers to allow enhanced management of the system and real-time troubleshooting. And this has been really critical to the infrastructure success to date. So these smart controllers are not new innovations, they're well tested and they have known replacement rates and operation and maintenance costs, and they've been widely used in other parts of the globe. One of the important features is that users can log into the portal from anywhere in the world, and system alarms can be sent to multiple stakeholders, so the community is not left to manage the infrastructure alone once the construction is complete. Of course, the next and very, very critical step is to transition this responsibility over to local agencies. The smart technology allows for this to be done in a staged approach, so allowing a period of time where both the design team and the city will undertake operation maintenance together to ensure that sufficient capacity is built for the long-term success. So another design consideration is that often in these sites, we're working in very data poor environments, and we need to acknowledge and utilise the local knowledge. Local knowledge can be a really powerful source of information which can be used alongside traditional engineering analysis. So for example, when we're designing flood mitigation infrastructure, anecdotal and visual observations can be obtained during the co-design process to better understand things like the local flood history, the flooding impacts, the community coping strategies, and also construction techniques. So while anecdotal evidence might be a little bit fragmented and lack some consistency, it does provide an important contribution to the verification and diversification of information sources in this data poor environment. So moving towards a whole of water cycle intervention increases the opportunities to build community resilience to shocks and stresses. So some examples include the co-delivery of access along with sanitation infrastructure, as you can see in the first two photos there. So this has greatly improved the resilience for communities during flood events. Another example is the inclusion of rainwater harvesting, which increases community resilience by increasing the diversity of water supply sources and reducing potable water demand. So these are just two examples of how design and implementation of a sanitation intervention, which is what it is at the core, can be an opportunity to provide co-benefits that maximise future community resilience. So nature-based solutions can have a wide range of benefits in terms of resilience. So if delivered at scale, at large scale, they can help to reduce urban heat impacts by increasing greenery. They can improve flood management and reduce pollution in downstream waterways. At the neighbourhood scale, they can help increase resilience and improve the local environment through improved drainage, utilising the fit for purpose water supply approach with multiple water sources, and utilising wastewater as a resource for economic activities. And they can even have even smaller scale benefits that meaningfully impact the day-to-day lives of individual households. An example of that is the raised pathway that you can see in the middle slide here, which was designed with flooding in mind, and it now allows vendors to visit regularly to the doorstep of all the households. And it's been a lot of feedback from particularly the women in the participating households about how that has really changed their lives. So not necessarily during flood times, but during their day-to-day life. So lastly, I'd just like to finish by saying that combining sanitation solutions with the delivery of a broader integrated water management approach or water sensitive approach can deliver a suite of benefits that include increasing climate resilience and also improving day-to-day lives and livelihoods. But we do need to value resilience as an outcome to ensure that these components of the design are included and retained throughout the design process. So non-network nature-based solutions for sanitation are an important contribution to the mix of solutions that are needed to meet the SDG targets. And lastly, I'd just like to say, if you would like to know more and follow the RISE journey, we have a monthly newsletter where you can sign up on the website there. And we also have a recently published book series, which outlines a bit more detail on the principles of the approach, the co-design process, and also the infrastructure components. So that's also available on the website. Thank you, Vicky.
Thank you very much, Carrie. Yes, we had just recently launched the KP, so you can download it from the website or send Carrie an email if you would like to get a copy. So thank you very much for that presentation. So this is one of the approaches that project officers can consider in addressing non-networked solutions for densely populated urban areas. Thank you very much, Carrie. So at this point, so the next three presentations all focus on community-based approaches. So instead of having individual presentations, we will have the format of moderated discussion. So we have three speakers from Oxfam. So each one of them will individually present for 2 minutes their presentation, and after that we will have some questions for them. So first off, I'd like to call on Michelle Farrington from Oxfam Global Humanitarian Team, Public Health Promotion, Community Engagement Lead. So Michelle, could you kindly spotlight her so she can share her slide? Thank you. Please go ahead, Michelle, to present your project.
Okay, so thank you very much, everybody, for allowing us to present today. So I'd like to present to you just a short overview of a project that we conducted in Cox Bazaar in Bangladesh, which was called the Social and Feminist Architecture Project. So just before I go into the project details, I wanted to give a little bit of an overview of Cox Bazaar itself and some of the challenges that site presents. So here you can see a picture of the mega camp, which is in Kutupalong in Cox Bazaar. And here you can see that there are nearly 900,000 refugees living just in the mega camp itself. The site was completely self-settled and also kind of faces a number of issues with the type of topography. It's very hilly but very densely populated, and also within that context, we were looking at aspects of sanitation where there are a lot of cultural factors that kind of exacerbate problems for women in particular to be able to use communal or shared latrines. So if we go to the next slide. So what we tried to do with this project is we wanted to really step out of the kind of wash practitioner's shoes a little bit to look at alternative ways of design that could support addressing some of the problems that women had highlighted to us. So what we did initially was some work with different groups of women and adolescent girls to try to identify some of the key issues that they were facing when using latrines. And a lot of those centered around protection issues, fear of violence, fear of being seen, not having enough privacy, and also not having adequate space to be able to manage their menstrual hygiene. So we did a lot of formative research with women to identify these issues. And then we worked with a group of architects, so female architects who had a focus on either social or feminist design. And what we said to them is, kind of blue sky thinking, like think about any kind of design that might work, because we really wanted to get out of the kind of mindset of traditional kind of emergency wash designs. So we held a series of collaborative workshops with the architects and with the women and girls, in which we really handed over the design process to the participants themselves. So within those workshops, the women kind of made a lot of designs, a lot of sketches, talked about what they would like the facilities to look like. And then the architects constructed both physical models, but also computer-based models, which you can see on the screen here, to really kind of show the groups that they had been working with what the final product should look like. And that was quite a big step, because we haven't really used architectural models for demonstrating what the final result of a sanitation facility might look like in emergency response before. Then what we did is try to build the model in reality as best as we could. So what you have here is kind of a picture of the design and then a picture of the end product. So we tried to keep those as close as we could to the designs that the women had put forward. Finish with these last pictures here, just to show the picture of the architectural models that we used. With just simple cardboard models, but they were really effective in helping women to visualize what the space would look like. But also wanted to show a couple of the other facilities that were completed, just to show as well that, you know, some of those original design features, like the washing lines in a private area, were things that were incorporated into the final design. So I'll leave it there, because I know we have more.
Defecating into makeshift containers, plastic bags, and it subsequently is emptied into open drains, rivers, and tossed away. So that's the context Oxfam entered into in 2010. And after scratching our heads about the enormity and complexity of the problem, we started trying to unpack some of these issues, think creatively of what Oxfam's added value could be. And this led us to the idea of a low-cost, portable, self-contained household toilet. So being located in people's existing dwellings, it wouldn't require any land, new infrastructure or official authorization. It would be accessible to women and children at night. And because it's not reliant on landlords or authorities to take action, it's potentially empowering tenants, and also addressing a reluctance of tenants to invest their own money in insecure rented accommodation, where the threat of demolition, eviction, fire, flooding is ever present. So in such an event, a household could take their toilet with them, so wouldn't lose their investment. So over a 10-year period, that's what we've tried to implement. It's had its ups and downs, lots of learning. Ultimately, I can't claim it's had the impact I'd hoped for, as the number of people with access to safe, affordable sanitation today is far lower than I'd hoped. But we have had successes, including designing and setting up local manufacture of this toilet in Kenya, influencing policy changes in Kenya, and contributing to wider recognition internationally that container-based toilets are an acceptable improved sanitation solution.
Thank you very much for that. So now I'd like to ask Dr. Hasnan from the Oxfam Regional Urban Humanitarian Public Health Coordinator Asia to introduce his project.
Hello, everyone. This is Hasnan, and I'm going to share my screen as well. Apologies, my screen and camera are two different places, so shift. Okay. I will be talking about basically the urban wash project which we had in Pakistan. So just for the introduction, I would like to say that, explain to you the urban context of Pakistan, which was more from the perspective, the slums are over there. The people are not aware who to talk to, their inadequate knowledge of constitutional rights and complaint mechanisms, poor and overflowed waste collection points, community facing challenges due to like overflowed sewer after rain. So what is actually happening is with rapid urban growth. The government capacity is outstripped because the infrastructure over there is quite old, and the needs and the gaps of the services, as well as especially from the WASH perspective, are growing, increasing. And so what we did is we came up with a project of integrated public health and economic empowerment for the urban poor in Pakistan. The major areas were Lahore and Muzaffargarh. These were two of the districts in Punjab, Pakistan. The project lasted for 2 years, from October 2017 to August 2019. Our target beneficiaries over here were mostly the urban slums and informal settlements in some of the union councils. Or the union council is basically within the district, there is further segregated, like number of hamlets or wards, they become combined to become one union council. So we came up with a few of the union councils in both the two districts. Our overall objective was to that the poor urban women, men, and youth in Punjab provinces of Pakistan, they have both the access to decent income opportunities and dignified, healthy habitat. And what were the key things we wanted to achieve? One was that communities actually contribute to the local governance, so more of the inclusive governance and oversight at the district level for the citizen rights and social cohesion. And the second point, this was more on the community side, while on the duty bearer side, we really focused on the local authorities become more responsive and have improved capacities actually to address the community needs. And last but not the least, to improve access to WASH services and vocational and technical skills were the main objectives. So over here, the active citizens were converted into effective citizen groups where they have developed their social plans, and social accountability forum was there. And then they were holding the basically the duty bearers accountable and increasing their voice, so that both an inclusive governance was practiced, where the communities as well as the government, they kind of did participative analysis as well as participative solutions to address the community needs. So this was what the introduction is. I think then I will come back to the questions later on.
Very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sorry, I muted myself. Okay, so now I'd like to direct some questions to our speakers. So starting off with Michelle. So you showed us earlier the context that you were working with in Rohingya, and I'm assuming, well, based on the photos, that there were no services available. It was very hilly. So what were the main challenges that you faced, and what tools were effective in achieving the project objectives? Please go ahead.
Thanks. I think some of the main challenges you've kind of mentioned there, but I mean, certainly the topography of the site was a huge challenge. So having very steep gradients in some places, but also it being very densely populated was a huge challenge for, first of all, just trying to be able to site and build sanitation facilities. But second of all, like trying to build those facilities in a way that was also taking into account some of the protection concerns and issues faced particularly by women and girls. I think as well the challenge of, well, kind of related to that, the challenge of space was that we couldn't construct enough latrines for every household to have one each, which was the preferred approach. So of course that kind of sharing facilities also leads to its own complications in terms of kind of cohesion between different households, but also presents a lot of issues in terms of protection, particularly for women and for girls. And we found a lot of very worrying coping mechanisms that women had adopted, particularly for using latrines at night, in that they would do things like use a bucket within the house so that they wouldn't have to go to the latrine at night, but then they'd be using that same bucket for washing, collecting water the next day. And even we heard that, you know, lots of women were reducing their food and their water intake, not only for themselves, but also for their children in the afternoons, because they didn't then want to use the latrines after it got dark. So, you know, there are a huge amount of challenges in terms of just the way that the density and the topography of the site and, you know, the kind of how would you say it, the outcomes, I guess, that had also on protection issues. So in terms of some of the tools that we use to try and overcome those challenges, I mean, I think this approach was kind of one way of trying to look at doing things differently. Particularly that in-depth formative research, I think that gave us a really good grounding to understand what the key issues were, and to help the architects as well look at what solutions could happen, particularly within that small space, for trying to design a facility that actually kind of overcame some of those issues. I think one of the most useful tools was the use of the models themselves. So quite often it can be very difficult. I mean, it's difficult for a lot of us who are not engineers to kind of look at a schematic diagram of a facility and then imagine what it is going to look like when it's built. So having the models that really showed what the space was going to look like, having the right kind of dimensions in terms of where the privacy wall was, where the hand washing station was going to be, where the mirror was going to be. I mean, even very small things like that, having them shown on a model really, really helped us adapt and change the facility design to make it appropriate for what women were asking for. So if I have time, just a very short example on that. When we made the model, we had the mirror positioned in one particular place next to the hand washing device. And when we showed the model to a group of women, they said, oh, well, it's all fine apart from the mirror. We don't want the mirror there. So we asked why, and it was because the mirror was in a place where you could be seen from the outside. And the women had said to us, we want it further inside so that if we need to adjust our hijab or we need to adjust our clothes in any way, no one can see us doing that, but we can see ourselves in the mirror. So very, very small things and very small changes in design, but they led to a really significant outcome in terms of the user's comfort of being able to use those facilities.
Yes, thank you very much. I agree very much with that. That I think critical in this process was the consultation, the involvement of the stakeholders in the design from beginning to actual construction, because you were able to incorporate all these nuances into the design. So thank you very much for sharing that. Great project. Okay, so next I'd like to thank you, Michelle. So now I'd like to call in Brian. So delivering sanitation services in urban slums is always a challenge. In the duration of the project, what technical and social solutions proved to be most effective? And also, how did you factor in sustainability of the investments by the community, given that a lot of these things need operations and maintenance and funding? So please go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, great. So I think it's, if I share my screen and you can see the actual product that we did come up with during the scope of the project. I think there's so many factors. It was very context specific, perhaps in Nairobi with the container-based solution that we came up with. So I think maybe it's best talking about the enabling factors that would be broadly relevant for other contexts. And if I had to prioritize a few, maybe I'll start with flexible funding. Community engagement was key, and then partnership. I guess they would be the three crucial factors. But in terms of the enabling environment, I was allowed and encouraged to take risks. I was lucky to be able to tap into flexible innovation funding that Oxfam had at that time, where it was accepted that failure is a possible and acceptable outcome. So I don't think at that time, back in 2010, any traditional donor would have given us money for this concept. It was high risk, and at that time, nothing similar had been trialed, certainly in Kenya context. So a containerized toilet at a time, I think perhaps before container-based sanitation as a widely known term or concept had been coined. I never thought, so I think it has been a successful project, but I never thought it would have taken 10 years to really get to a point where we're starting to reach people in numbers. So having that flexible funding, patient supported managers, I think that's been key. On the community, I think critical to all the planning has been informed decisions based on a sound understanding of the problem, the barriers, enablers, the linkage and interaction, and the knock-on effect between all these. I think, quite frankly, when we first started trying to understand the problem, it was really overwhelming, and it was only when, well, 90% of our understanding, I think, has been developed from community engagement and consultation. So at every stage, sitting down, understanding the context, problems people are facing, tapping into their knowledge and ideas on what solutions might be. So as part of this, and I think what was particularly useful, we invested quite a lot of time, effort and resources on hiring a research and marketing company to support some very detailed quantity and qualitative baseline research, and that was something we continued to come back to. It was a robust piece of research which stood up to scrutiny and really informed everything we've done subsequently. So it ranked that sanitation was the highest ranking problem female residents in the slums wanted to address. It was literally keeping them awake at night. It endorsed the concept that a household portable container-based toilet wasn't a stupid idea. It confirmed it was socially acceptable to have, use and share a toilet within a 1 or 2 room dwelling, and identified so many blockers, enablers, and willingness, ability to pay. It was really the sounding board for all the decisions. And I think key, thirdly, partnership has also been instrumental in everything we've achieved. So we started to realize there were other like-minded organizations grappling with the same problems, both in Kenya and internationally, and pooling resources would benefit all of us. So within Oxfam, we had engineers, we had some experience in policy issues and influencing government departments, but we knew little about value chains, entrepreneurship, what makes a successful business. So we were able to team up with one particularly brilliant local partner called Sanitation, and relatively quickly realized that Oxfam's role would be much better supporting them, as they had skill sets and experience that we lacked. If I had more time, I'd go into technical design. That was a huge component of the project and massively time consuming, but maybe the more overarching point on technical design is to flag, and I think something Michelle has already touched upon, just the importance of consultation and getting feedback from users, so at each stage of the process, and not assuming that because a technical solution worked in community X, it's also going to work in community Y.
Yes. Thank you very much for sharing that, Brian. And again, aside from the community consultation process that Michelle, that the common theme I'm seeing in these two presentations, I think the what is coming out from your presentation is that you mobilize other partners in understanding the whole sanitation value chain and seeing how that can support the sustainability of your project. When you talked about the entrepreneurship component and bringing in all these different partners, so I think that's also a good point to highlight in your project. Thank you very much for that. And last but not least, I'd like to invite Dr. Hasnan. So he's talking about their water supply project in Pakistan. So the provision of water supply sanitation services only represents one side of the solution, but in order to deliver improved health outcomes, it needs to be matched with hygiene, awareness raising, behavioral change, among others. So how did you marry these two components in your project? Thank you. 5 minutes. Go ahead, Dr. Hasnan.
Okay, thank you. I hope you all can screen my screen.
Yep.
Okay, that's good. Okay, how I did, like, that's a very good question when you saw how we have married actually the bit of that, like the hygiene and the health with the hard component. what we have really learned in this thing is like we have done the hygiene promotion through community engagement. So what was really important was you have to understand the communities and the governance. So one stick is not the solution for everyone. So what we have realized over there, that instead of considering the health consequences, urban communities was more concerned over the social and daily life factors rather than, you know, the health, that they will get sick or something. They were more like, you know, I hope this wastewater doesn't go to my house, how this problem can be fixed, how my girls will go to school, and from these sort of things, aesthetic sense over there. So those were some of the things which were really the motivating factors for bringing the hygiene promotion in the community, especially from the perspective of behavior change. The key factors at the community end was, one was that they does have the hygiene literacy, but they had very limited enabling environment to support that kind of an hygiene promotion behavior and the things like the practices over there. They have inadequate knowledge of communities, especially on their constitutional rights of men and women. In Pakistan and a number of developing countries, what we see is that there is some sort of a provision within the constitutional rights where they are entitled to some of the facilities, but they do not know about that. This is why they never ask for those things. Lack of information related to complaint response mechanisms of government, that how they can actually hold the government or the duty bearers accountable or actually demand those sort of services, except like other than, you know, the protests and things like that. What is the legal, or for example, the formative way of doing those sort of things? And then when we looked into from the more of the feminist approach, where we really are really basically encouraging the different areas, especially from the relation of power dynamics and the responsibility dynamics, we realize that all these things are actually the responsibility of men, while they are mostly engaged in the economic engagement. So they are unable to cope up with these sort of complaint mechanisms. Even if they exist, they do not have the time to do those sort of things. At the duty bearer end, what were the problems was that there was unclarity on roles and responsibilities to address the constitutional rights of the communities. You know, in developing countries, the government is considered more as a power figure rather than the service figure, that they are serving the community. So how we are going to challenge that aspect as well? Lack of community follow-up, because when the community also sees that they are the power figures, they stop following up. And then there is poor accountability in terms of limited communication with the community, is only one time a year or something. So that was something we really wanted to address. So what we did is like we started developing the capacities of effective citizen groups on hygiene promotion, their consumer protection rights, their constitutional rights, and right to information. Followed by we have formalized the groups from like the effective citizen groups, and we formed the participatory monitoring and evaluating groups, which were including the media as well as the government officials over there in like kind of participative inclusive governance over there to improve the social accountability. And you know, the urban voice is far more than the rural. Anything which comes over there as a hype immediately becomes a priority for the members of parliaments and things like that. They come over here. And lastly, we developed all their capacities on, you know, the water safety planning, so that those participatory monitoring evaluating group are not just the groups, but they do have those right skills actually to see how things are going on and how they can follow up and things like that. So what was the result in doing all these things? We achieved there was a decrease excuse me, decrease in waterborne diseases. It also helped in reducing the health expenditure. And beyond WASH, we were able to improve the women leadership, because we encourage the women, as men are engaged in the economic figure. So we wanted women to take the lead over there. So women leadership was there, and social accountability of duty bearers. An interesting thing was that not only the WASH things, they started holding accountable on the government, for example, street lights, electricity, power, other dynamics as well, beyond WASH as well. So I just want to give you another, like, for example, just a sample example over there. What we did is, like, in the communities, we really wanted to give them a catalytic fund support, so that how they can do some immediate changes the community really want to see. Otherwise, they start losing the interest. So Oxfam started investing with them. So participative governance along with the government and the communities, we came up with a number of schemes. We identified a number of schemes. So Oxfam with their partners invested in 7 schemes of WASH. And what was really interesting that the government actually invested in 21 schemes around it. So, it was an inference of 3 times the scale of Oxfam project where we were supporting. So government actually invested on 21 schemes over there. And that was something really sort of inspiring for the communities. So the neighboring communities also starting doing these sort of things, which had a very good impact on, basically this was more on the wash aspect, but they started holding the government accountable on a number of things. Some of the key learnings before I keep quiet is that, behavior change requires at least 4 to 5 years. The project was only 2 years. Maybe organizations like ADB or whenever the planning phase is going on, this factor needs to be considered in, because if you really want to change the practices, to change the behavior, you really have to look into the timeline. Otherwise, we are not sure about the impact of it. The second thing is the capacity building of communities and mutual dialogues with duty bearers really play a key role in health and health promotion. Why is that so? Because of the Ottawa Charter we know about, and as well as, it provides the enabling environment and promote the healthy policy formation for the communities. And last but not the least, once the communities get mobilized on social and daily life factors rather than the health factors for improving the hygiene factor, that is some sort of a more motivating factors for communities to bring change rather than only the health-related outcomes. So this is all what I think, where I will say that how the health and hygiene married the hard component, and the soft component is equally important. And sometimes some of the donors do not consider it tangible enough, so they sometimes ignore it. But this is, I think, how you will have a resilient communities over there, which can actually be improved later on. Thank you.
Correct. Thank you very much, Hasnan. I'm glad you mentioned the bringing together the hard and soft measures, because no one is equal, is more important than the other. Everything has to go together. And you also highlighted the institutional aspect, which I think is very, very important in ensuring that there's strong buy-in from both the government and the stakeholders. Okay, so thank you very much to our speakers. That was a long run, but I hope we are able to keep your interest. So now I'd like to open the floor for the Q&A. So again, maybe we can spotlight our speakers. So Lakshmi, Bon, Carrie, Ramon, Michelle, Hasnan, and Brian. Is it possible? Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, so I was going back to the questions that came up in the chat box. So the first one was for Lakshmi. So from Soma, Lakshmi, could you please elaborate a bit on gender and community participation in the framework that was used in the Madhya Pradesh project?
Thank you, Vicky, and all for the very nice and excellent presentations. I also learned lots from other countries' experience. About the questions about the gender and the community participation, actually, CWIS itself is the public service approach. No one left behind. It's an inclusive approach. It's beyond the infrastructure. Earlier, we used to focus on the infrastructure, how to make the infrastructure resilient, right? But the CWIS itself is to the inclusive and the resilient communities itself. What does it mean is that it does not matter how it does not matter the inputs, but how the service become inclusive in that process. So what is actually the Madhya Pradesh is doing is that we have a very strong gender elements has been embedded, starting from the consultation process in the planning itself, where the legislative representative from the females legislatives, they will consulted, they will make aware of the CWIs, they will make aware of the sanitation, so that they can also lead all the dialogues with their own counterpart itself, within a government itself. Not only that, the poor and the like, for example, I was mentioning of the DPRs, whereas the left outs are non-served area, with particularly on the slums and the vulnerable groups, they were identified, and the reason for being exclusions was looked at it, which is not really because of it's. And then, as I want to mention it, the government of Madhya Pradesh is also very much reform oriented. That is actually make us very, easy, or the dialogue has been more active in order to how to make the women and the community on board. So there is a like a participations, like it's not, I don't should not call as a quota, but there is a benchmarking on that, a number of participations of the women also, just to make them more incentivizing. And then we also first time introduced the internship program for the women graduates to bring the leaders on the sanitation itself for the water supply. At the poor level, the sanitation cells also been composed and the participation has been ensured, and that are being at the regulatory and the capacity development program is also included on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lakshmi. So maybe Michelle and Carrie, you just want to add in a little bit from the gender perspective from your projects? Michelle or Carrie, go ahead.
I just very quickly, I think that for RISE, we trialed a lot of different activities in the co-design process and actually adjusted them as we went. We had the benefit of being part of a research project. So we tried many things. Some worked, some didn't work. And we adjusted a lot along the way because we found that for RISE, it was a water and sanitation project, and that was seen as women's business and got really good participation of women to start with. And then we had to adjust to make sure that we could bring them in along as well. And so we set up a big tent that was allowed for a space for the men to gather as well, and allowed them to interact with all the activities. So I think, you know, while we were worried about getting participation of women and youth and children, we got that very quickly, but then we had to adjust to make sure we were really being inclusive because we wanted everybody's input.
Thank you very much, Carrie. Michelle, anything to add?
Not really to add, but I just wanted to pick up on the last point as well that Kerry raised there, is that with the social architecture project especially, we were very much focused on the needs of women and girls, but actually within humanitarian contexts, those same issues of protection issues or kind of issues of being able to utilize sanitation facilities exist within much broader groups within the community as well. Particularly, we're doing now also some research looking at the needs of older people with emergency sanitation, and we're finding a lot of the same issues are coming up there as well. So I think this idea of inclusion but broadening it just outside of, you know, kind of thinking in terms of gendered lines, but also broadening it to looking at other users' needs, I think is really important. So just to highlight that there.
Thank you very much for that, Michelle. So I think this next question would be for Ramon and Bon. So if talking about city-wise, if it is predicted that the city will experience degradation, including obedience to the groundwater level, why is it necessary to have resilience when it is certain to have a detrimental impact on the city? Is there a need for drastic changes or moving cities? This question is from Tris Hardianto.
It would be important to look at resilience as an embedded component of the whole planning process. So it's not just looking at the technical aspects of building resilience, but bringing that to bear as well on a more system-oriented perspective, complementing technical solutions that are based on engineering with nature solutions that Kerry explained. And more importantly, having a buy-in from the community in even identifying the solutions and taking those forward. Whether the problem is unavoidable, that should not be seen as a deterrent, because we may not know the solution to that, but the people who have to live under these conditions can have a better perspective on how best they can cope with that. And so we should support those perspectives. Vicky?
Okay. Thank you very much, Mon. So Bon, anything to add? No. Okay. So there was a question for Carrie. So please explain for shelter above water or shelter that is frequently flooded. Sanitation is important, but being a high cost standard, resilience is needed not only at the level of funds, but more than concern for the environment in the existing community.
Thanks, Vicky. I feel like there's a lot to unpack in that question. And I did answer a little bit in the chat.
Okay.
We haven't looked at the situation where there are houses above water, specifically for rise. Our settlements are subject to flooding, but only during the wet season. I think it's a really, really important issue. And I certainly think there would be solutions that some of the solutions that are used in the RISE program, and potentially adding some other components of infrastructure to help address that. But I think it definitely needs contextualizing to really have a good assessment of what the situation is and what the infrastructure would be that would be appropriate.
Okay, thank you very much, Carrie. And so I'm just looking at the time, it's 4:53. So I would just like to direct this final question to Brian and to Dr. Hasnan. So, are we talking enough about gender and social planning for sanitation, particularly with respect to architects and planners? Is it possible to compile or disseminate a curriculum so that others may use this or develop? So Hasnan and Brian, please.
Hasnan, I'll let you go first.
Okay, thank you. I think I was also seeing another question as well, is bringing women on board is enough or not? I think, yes, it is never enough, but the important thing is if we bring women on board, give them sort of a steering of something, like the power is shifted. We really have to understand the cultural and the power dynamics over to understand the shift of power, the inequalities and things. So it is not only bringing women anywhere, is that enough or not, but actually to bring women on those powered positions is also a hell of a struggle as well, because, it is challenging the power of already empowered people. So, when we really want to focus more on the feminist principles from the perspective of, the power dynamics, the inequalities, we really have to sometimes become, supporting the equity aspect of the rights of the women. When you look at for example, when you look at the care work, you look at the cooking, you look at the taking care of the children, you look at the cleanliness of the sanitation facilities, everything is actually a role of a woman. When it comes to, the power or the structure of where it needs to be, what design, sometimes it is on the other part of the society which takes the decision. So we really have to see it from that aspect. And I think we, all of us together, needs to emphasize on it, so that even the government does not only consider that the community engagement is just like going to anywhere in the community and start discussing over there, but you actually talk with all the community members, like the women, the girls, as well as the vulnerable population, especially like the disabled, or especially the minorities, whether they're religious minorities or the like, for example, sexual minority, the transgenders, which we have actually addressed some of the needs in our project as well, are equally important when we design any sort of an inclusive governance or inclusive projects for anyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Hasnan. And our final word from Brian.
Yeah, not really anything to add. I think I would have been blind to it until we started doing our own consultations at community level and sitting to really understand issues from different perspectives. So just the importance of going through that process at the beginning, and once you start to understand the nature of the problems, it's just impossible to ignore and not try and address.
Okay, thank you. We had a very rich discussion from the presentations all the way to the Q&A. Unfortunately, we're running out of time. So if you have any further questions, please just post them in the chat box, and then we will direct them to our speakers. And now, unfortunately, Joris was called to another meeting, but I'd like to call on Virender Sharma to do a quick wrap up of today's session. If you could spotlight Virender. Yes, please go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Vicky, and of course, all the speakers. I would say that this has been a really power-packed session with 7 different presentations and covering almost the last 2 hours. Very interesting questions and discussion. What I like about I think this whole reflecting back on some key insights and reflections from what was presented, One is that you're trying to address the sanitation value chain. And I think each of these speakers have offered very practical solutions to which have been implemented, of course, in their own context, but can be replicated in a larger number of contexts. And that's why I think it's important that all the presentations are actually focusing on what CWIS, the concept is, and how it can be practically implemented. The other important thing about this session was that we were looking at scale. So we started off with Lakshmi talking about the project. She started off at a very sort of large level where we were talking about the city, the 62 urban local bodies. Again, how she was trying to bring together stormwater, sewage, and water supply together, looking at it more from an integrated planning, and then bringing this whole, combination of CWIS and geospatial mapping. So this illustrates that you can actually go ahead and do these things at a city level. That was done in Madhya Pradesh, India. And what was actually important in that presentation was the evidence-based decision-making, taking the project proponents, the government, and ADB together in delivering the CWIS package. Of course, then at the next scale, Bon came in with his specific presentation on Semarang, focusing more on how you can use open data and then plan your networks, both centralized and decentralized, and look at some of the risks and challenges that could be faced in that location, whether it's around, sea level rise. Again, focusing more on ultimately, how this is affecting the poor and vulnerable in the city. And from that scale, we moved to Carrie, which was very much at a community level, a pilot which was very specific with a very strong message on working with communities, co-designing with communities, and a combination of both nature-based solutions and delivering sanitation solutions, but delivering much more than that in terms of health benefits directly to the communities. Three important presentations, very quick presentations we had from Michelle from Bangladesh on the Rohingya settlement and the design of toilets. Then Brian from Kenya on introducing this the approach to in the Kenyan slums, and then Said talking about participative solutions and how this actually addresses the broader issue of CWIS. I think the combination of culture and social issues that Said demonstrated, Carrie also demonstrated, I think similarly in Michelle's presentation, just illustrates that behavior change communication needs a lot of insights into community culture and social practices before you can start offering solutions. And I think what I liked is that specifically I think Brian mentioned this, the possibility of taking risks, having failure safe project where you can innovate things, which gives you the possibility of actually testing something, but then not from the perspective of always being successful and learning from that. And that sort of just brings me to the final thing, is what was presented by Ramon at the beginning, which is around resilience. I think a combination of all that, if you look at what was presented today, addressing climate change issues, flooding issues, technology issues. Broadly, I think what we are talking about is how social, institutional, natural, infrastructure, economic and financial issues can then contribute to the resilience aspect that Raymond presented. So I think started off with that scene setting presentation I can see that various strands of these 7 presentations are very much embedded into how you can achieve resilience. And finally, I think the message that we got from Lakshmi was on the multiplicity of institutions and multiplicity of challenges. And of course, the multiplicity of solutions is what has been attempted in this particular session. So I really like it. And the emphasis on monitoring and evaluation, because ultimately, you could start big at a scale that Lakshmi was doing, or you could start small at a scale that Michelle was doing, or perhaps Said and Brian were doing. But it's important to actually see how this leads to the service delivery aspects and ultimate benefit from the combined decentralized and centralized sanitation solutions. So thank you very much for this interesting session and for taking us together and delivering a very powerful message on the multiple aspects to approach resilience in sanitation, which is, of course, your topic, how to deal with climate strategies in sanitation. And because this was also raised in the morning plenary session, which was more about high-level messages, I think you have really opened up each of the specific issues and provided very interesting solutions for people to address them and perhaps reflect on them and see how they can replicate it. So thank you very much. So back to you, Vicky.
Okay, thank you very much, Virender, for summing up the key takeaways from this session. I know it was a little heavy, but I'm glad that a lot of you stayed on for to listen to the different presentations. So just a final reminder before logging off, there's a quick survey. We'd like to invite you to answer a quick survey. It's in the chat box, so if you could just click on it. And then again, I would like to thank all our speakers for taking the time to prepare your presentations. I know it took some time to do that and staying with us this whole afternoon. So for the rest of the participants, the presentations will be available in the next 24 hours, including the recording. And I hope you can also make the time to join the other sessions. So again, thank you very much, everyone. Have a good day, good evening, and good afternoon. Bye. Thank you.